It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Galloway and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
A tidal wave of black begins to turn red in Tehran as 10 million people mourn the martyred leader of the Islamic Revolution and a leader of 200 million Shiite Muslims around the entire world, and probably the leader of many, many more who don't so identify, is finally now in the middle of the funeral of Dr. Seyed Khamenei. And Donald Trump makes a hash of America's 250th birthday party, as only he can do. No doubt he made a profit. He probably bought some shares in the fireworks that he wasted so much of the American taxpayers' money by exploding, perhaps appropriately, on the 4th of July. And Nigel Farage is finished. You heard it here first on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Stay tuned. Well, let me start with the less important story first. Nigel Farage is revealed in the Times in an in-depth investigation, I think they call it, into still more illicit funding, this time by a convicted criminal, undeclared and running into millions. The betting markets have almost closed the book on the proposition that Nigel Farage is poised to resign over mounting financial scandals and other things. And the question is reform anything without Nigel Farage? I'm going to bet, if I were a betting man, and if the betting markets will allow me, let me predict reform itself is finished with Nigel Farage, especially when he goes out in a bowl of fire, having been cashiered by the House of Commons authorities, or probably he won't even allow it to get to that point. While I'm on British matters, the BBC uses the law to force you to pay them. That's right. Even Stalin didn't think of the idea of forcing the public to pay for the state mouthpiece television. But the BBC did and does. But they've gone one step further. They have now informed YouTube, which you might be watching this very program, that they must now prioritize trusted news sources. Now, leaving aside the fact that if a state regards you as a trusted news source, you are automatically untrustworthy until proven otherwise. Leaving that aside, prioritizing BBC One, BBC Two, Channel 4, Sky News, God knows what, Uncle Tom, Cobley and all means deprioritizing everybody and everything else. And they're going to force YouTube to do this on pain of financial sanction or worse. So it's a double whammy. And let me, as I'm in the business now, it seems, of prediction, predict something else. Once they've done this, they will charge you a license fee for watching YouTube, which is hitherto exempt from that. And there are very large numbers of people, certainly in this country, probably in others, who only watch television on their computer, on YouTube and other such platforms. Never switch on one of the lamestream television broadcast platforms. And in Britain, that means you can avoid paying for a license fee, but I'm going to predict not for much longer. We don't have time to debate either of these two things tonight, though feel free to call up about them if you feel particularly strongly, because the big international stories are, well, just too big. There was a spectacular piquancy about the funeral of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran and a theologian as well as a political leader of very great importance, slain mercilessly by the United States and Israel on the first day of the Ramadan war. And not slain alone, his wife, his daughter, her children. The massacre of the Khamenei family was such that the little girl, little granddaughter, 14 months old, was playing in a room on her own with her toys and was scalded, scorched, burned to death by these animals in Washington, D.C. and in occupied Tel Aviv. These beasts in human form didn't stop there. Their taste, their lust for killing children, long developed on Epstein Island and many other places, sordid places of ill repute. Of course, continued later that day with the mass murder of 160 little girls in Menab, in a primary school, sitting at their desks. Well, the funeral has been long anticipated. It's 129 days or so since the massacre of the Khamenei household took place. But finally, a 6-day funeral, because the coffins of the family of the slain, martyred leader are being moved around, not just all the cities with which he was associated closely in Iran, but also to Karbala, a holy place for Shiite Muslims in neighboring Iraq, and then back to Mashhad, his home city where he will be finally buried. It completely overshadowed Trump's farcical 4th of July 250th birthday celebrations for the United States, about which more in a minute. Completely. Certainly if you watch social media, which most people do. That's why they're having to force you to watch BBC on YouTube on pain of financial penalty. But if you are on social media, the images are simply staggering, overwhelming. 10 million people so far have attended the funeral commemorations, ceremonies. In Tehran, wait till you see the crowds elsewhere. Wait till you see Karbala. This is the biggest funeral in human history. It's possibly the biggest collection of people for any reason ever in the history of mankind. And when Donald Trump, according to Axios, I know a highly dubious source, but according to Axios, Trump evinced surprise to see millions of people weeping. I was told they didn't like him, he said. This is the caliber of the intelligence given to President Trump before he pulled the trigger, not just on Dr. Khamenei and his family, children, grandchildren, but on the whole people of Iran, and plunged the world into a war which could have and may yet turn into a global catastrophe, economic as well as military, and has already cost the lives of thousands of people. I was told they didn't like him, said Donald Trump, and he believed them. Well, he knows better now, for sure, because he's seen the same pictures as we have. And it was a tidal wave of black in mourning clothes. The grief, the grieving, the sadness. But it's giving way, I sense, by this evening to a desire for revenge. The red flags of revenge have begun perceptibly to replace the other flags in the crowd, a crowd of millions. Those red flags of revenge portend many important developments to come. It doesn't mean revenge on the ordinary people of America, but it may very well portend that this war is certainly not over yet. It may portend that if this war is started again by Trump or Netanyahu or both, that the Iranians will return to it with a savagery hitherto abjured, because somebody said on American television, look, they're chanting death to America. Well, of course they were chanting death to America. It was America that caused the funeral. It was America that murdered an 80-year-old man, his wife, his children, his grandchildren, in an instant. It was America that murdered the schoolgirls in Manab. What do you expect them to chant at a funeral for those slain by American imperialism? Which leads me neatly, I hope, to a brief but important diversion on the history of that imperialism. America is 250 years old yesterday. Only 19 of these years have been spent without the United States at war with other people in their countries. No country has invaded the United States of America, but the United States of America and its loyal auxiliaries in the satrapies of Western Europe have never been done invading other people's countries, stealing their land, stealing their wealth, stealing their people as slaves. And of course, the United States was founded on the genocide of the Native American people, the biggest genocide the world has ever seen. We hear a lot about other genocides, and so we should. But the biggest genocide of them all is the genocide of 100 million Native Americans from North America to the cone of South America. Colonialism, Spanish, French, English, Western settler colonialism murdered 100 million people. Columbus didn't discover America. America was already there and filled with tens of millions of people of different nations, with different tongues, with different cultures, religions, living on the land they had been living on for millennia. And then the ships of brigands, the ships of settlers, the same kind of settlers you see in occupied Palestine on a daily basis. And they murdered them, almost all. And then they took Africans from their countries in chains as slaves. And when forced finally to free them, they instituted a system of apartheid against them, which has lasted until this day, as any black person in the United States will tell you, and they're celebrating. In fact, even worse, there are lunatics in Beirut celebrating 250 years of America. There are lunatics in Japan on whom the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs, who are firing off fireworks to celebrate American Independence Day. Well, Trump had the greatest opportunity to preside over such a landmark birthday, and he made a total hash of it. I don't know how much he spent on those fireworks, these explosions in Washington, D.C., but I thought it was appropriate, considering the United States has set off more explosions in the world than anybody else in history. For me, the fireworks display was a display of hubristic, totemic violence, which was, as I say, entirely appropriate. He had to call off the parade because apparently the weather was too hot. I wonder what the weather's been like for the last 254th of Julys. The truth is, he called it off because, like his fair in the center of Washington, D.C., it was doomed to humiliating, because Donald Trump has done more to divide the American people, to demoralize and deprive of essentials the American people. He has done more to loot and rob the American people than any leader in the history of the country, and there have been a lot of brigands who have done so in the past. Donald Trump is a thief. He's a betrayer. He's an abuser of women and allegedly of little girls. He's an associate of the most sordid Epstein class degenerates that the world has ever seen. And it is our great, great misfortune that we have had to live in the time of Donald Trump. Stay tuned. There's a lot more coming from two superb guests, absolutely world class. First up, Seyed Professor Mohammad Marandi, direct from Tehran, in the midst of all the funeral commemorations. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. The talk shows this morning are treating the defeat of Dan Goldman as if some jack-booted fascist had kicked him out of his congressional office. It was a Jew that beat him. One Jew beat another Jew. Goldman was the Jew that supports Netanyahu, and his challenger and the man who defeated him is also Jewish, but completely opposes the genocide in Gaza. I say sing hallelujah. The victory of that kind of Jewish insurgent is precisely what we have been waiting for. What the world needs now is the Jewish people themselves to step forward and start proving all over again, as they did in centuries of European and North American struggles, that they are indeed an avant-garde people, that they are in the avant-garde of humanity, for justice, for freedom and liberty, rather than apartheid, slavery and genocide. I myself want to take my hat off to Mayor Mamdani and to ask my colleagues no longer to play that jingle that basically insults him. I was wrong about Mayor Mamdani. He's doing a great job, and he is making popular ideas that America needs, and which I pray they will continue to reach for.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talkshows with George Galloway.
Here's the poll tonight. In 250 years, has America been a force for good or evil? You decide. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, or on my X, or on the YouTube community poll. And if you are watching on the YouTube stream, you can also vote there, but don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I must get to 1 million subscribers. And if you are one of the advance guard, who are the creme de la creme, supporting the show through patreon.com/George Galloway, you can also vote there. 25,000 more, 26,000 people have voted in the poll already. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number is 0044 96626. Something. I can't see it on the edge of my screen. Now, Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran, is our constant companion, and we are all much the wiser for that. And in the midst of a very busy schedule, in the funeral commemorations themselves, he joins us now. It goes without saying, I hope, Professor, our thoughts, the thoughts of all right-thinking people, are with you and with the people of Iran on this occasion. But am I right in saying that there's some significance to the fact that slowly, and I've been watching all day, and a lot of my friends are there, you, Dr. Halali, Jackson Hinkle, Henningsen, Patrick Hennington, many of our friends, Max Blumenthal, are all there, and I've been watching you all day, and I've noticed that the red flag of revenge is beginning to be hoisted amongst the crowd. Do explain to the audience what that means, please.
Well, thank you, George. It's always a great pleasure and a great honor being on your show. You know, I'm extremely sincere, and I've always been a fan of yours. And every time I come on the show, for me, it's sort of like a student giving a moral examination to the professor. So I'm grateful, and I hope I can say something worthy of for your audience. The crowd today, George, was unprecedented. I've never seen anything like that in my life. And I live in a country where we have many very large rallies. General Soleimani, when he was martyred, huge. Imam Khomeini, when he passed away in 1989, it was massive. President Raisi, when he was killed in the helicopter crash, whether it was an accident or not, I still don't know. Crowds were massive, but this was something altogether different. I left for home almost 3 hours before the prayers this morning, and I couldn't get there. And I was stuck with hundreds of thousands of other people in the south part of the complex, to the south of the complex, and we just couldn't get around it to be a part of the prayers. That just shows how massive it was, many millions of people. And the crowd we couldn't move. And it's right behind the complex. Maybe you could tell through the lights. So this was an extraordinary show of force. I mean, huge compassion for the leader, his family. You could see that emotions were running high. And it's been going on since yesterday. Since yesterday morning, people were coming. I actually went with a couple of our good friends that you mentioned yesterday to the Musalla. And today I went again for the prayer. And crowds just keep coming and going. Tomorrow is the funeral procession. So it will go from the east of the city to the west, the procession with the martyrs, Ayatollah Khamenei and his family members, his granddaughter, 1-year-old son-in-law, and one of his son-in-laws and one of his daughters were martyred. They were not husband and wife, but in any case, the procession, I imagine, will be massive as well. This is probably the largest gathering, I think the largest funeral in history, human history. And it's sending a message to the United States as well, and to the Israeli regime. And yes, you're right. People would come up to me and speak about the need for revenge. Some people who know me from media. And you could see people with their own with their own posters and their own, they're holding up banners saying that demanding revenge. And it's clear that the Iranians feel that there is a need to punish the aggressors. Now, what that means and what that will ultimately lead to, I can't say, but it just shows how angry ordinary Iranians are towards the United States, towards the Trump regime, towards the Israeli regime, and they feel that even though they won the war, that the enemy, those who murdered their loved ones, their children, at the Minab school and in hospitals and elsewhere, that they deserve more punishment. So this is something I think that the West has to take into account. And I think for the first time, I haven't been following the news, but I think for the first time there is some admission that these crowds are very massive. Because usually in the West, they say thousands of Iranians went to the streets when perhaps 1 million or 2 went. Or they say, at most they'll say tens of thousands. But this was in like many millions of people. And when you count all the people who come and go from yesterday till now, the number is just beyond belief.
Well, the Tehran metro recorded 7 million journeys on the metro alone. That doesn't take account of those who travel by other means. Reuters is reporting 9 millions at the actual funeral itself. Let's just say it's the biggest crowd in human history. It's the biggest funeral in human history. And as Donald Trump said, he was told that people didn't like him. I mean, I don't know whether to laugh or cry at that admission by Donald Trump. And I can hear him saying it. He is a big palooka, after all. He does say what comes into his mind. There is no politician's filter with him. I can hear him say, look at all these people, look at all those tears. I was told that people didn't like him. And therefore, I think he's maybe got some killer's remorse.
Well, Trump is Trump, George, and you're right. Remember, just a few weeks ago, in order to justify the MOU, which was highly beneficial to Iran and a clear indication of U.S. defeat, he admitted that the U.S. was running out of fuel. And they're only 4 weeks away from running out of fuel. I mean, usually politicians or leaders would never admit that sort of thing. And he's also said other things of a similar nature about Iran before. But this just shows, George, I mean, I know that he's known not to read his intelligence briefings and so on, but he does meet the head of the CIA. He does meet senior intelligence officials. Joe Kent was an appointee of his. He had met him regularly. So either the intelligence agencies are lying to him. I mean, forget the briefings, but I mean, the officials themselves, either they're lying to him or it's a combination of two things. Because if you follow Western media, and I don't, I follow your program, I follow you, I follow many other good friends, the people you named earlier, but I don't follow any of these mainstream Western media outlets on Twitter. But if you follow Western media, that's the sort of thing you would believe. That if whether it's Fox News or MSNBC or Sky News or the BBC or CNN or The Guardian or Breitbart, the Washington Post, it doesn't matter. Iran will be evil. The regime, they'll always call it a regime. They'll never call Saudi Arabia a regime. They'll never call the Emirates a regime. Those like Iran and Cuba, that are regimes. The regime is corrupt. The regime is unpopular. The regime is imploding. It reminds me of Piers Morgan, because whenever he speaks with me, every other word is regime. So the regime is about to collapse. And so when he turns on TV, and he usually watches Fox News apparently, that's what he's going to hear. And that's what American analysts are saying. That's what they're in their textbooks, in the books that they write. There are very few books on Iran, on contemporary Iran in the West, that I think are worth reading. Actually, on a number of shows, I spoke of Going to Tehran by Flint and Hillary Leverett, who were in the White House, as a very good book, or Resistance by the essence of the Islamist revolution, being a very good book. Or Peter Oborn, who you know, A Dangerous Delusion. That is also a good book on the Iranian nuclear program. They're very Alistair Crook wrote the book Resistance. There are very few books, good books to read. So when the media is hostile towards Iran, when the analysts are hostile towards Iran, because that's how you get your books published. That's how you have to write what the think tanks or what the publishers want you to write. Rarely is something good going to come out. So I'm not surprised that that senior officials in the United States are hostile towards Iran and think that way. But for him to say this, it means that not only is the media and the analysts saying nonsense, but also the intelligence agencies, or at least those who lead the intelligence agencies, they're producing and giving him nonsense as well.
Well, you'll be glad to know, Professor, that I may be writing the Iran handbook. I'm just waiting for a green light on that. It won't be on the academic scale of the people that you mentioned, but it will be a handbook with pictures and words for every man, for every woman, and will be a quick enough read. So I'll keep you posted
you're going to
on
have
that.
to give me a
I'd love
signed
you to
copy.
write the foreword. Well, I'd love you to write the foreword, but we'll talk off air about that. Now, Professor, I mean, you mentioned previous big losses, and you mentioned the founder of the Islamic Republic himself, Ayatollah Khomeini. You mentioned President Raisi, who may or may not have been murdered. Neither of us knows that yet for sure. But this is on a different scale because for 29 years, the towering figure of Khamenei was there. You see it now reflected in the grief of the people. This is genuinely the father of the nation, the vast majority of the nation. Of course, there will be some who are not grieving, but the vast majority of Iranians are. And it seems clear that this, therefore, has backfired spectacularly on the murderers, because not only has it rallied the Iranians as one, but it has shown the world, the rest of the world, that had been told otherwise, that the Iranians are one. And this must affect the dynamics of what comes next in negotiations or in war.
Oh, absolutely, George. First of all, I think Ayatollah Khamenei was, when you speak about moderates, I think that the real moderation was what he was. And that being revolutionary is being moderate. But he was a man of culture, and I know you know this, but I'm saying it for your audience. He spoke 4 languages. He was a man of literature. His Persian was excellent, and his command of Persian literature excellent. His command of Azeri literature excellent. The most famous Azeri poet in the last few hundred years or ever, Shahriyar, was his close friend. His Arabic, brilliant, and of course he was a scholar in religious studies, but also in literature. And he was fluent in English. He read in English, and he would read Western media outlets. He read novels in English. So he, and at the same time, George, he was the person behind this military strategy that led us to victory. Remember a few years ago when Iran began to develop drones, they were making fun of drones across the world. Well, the Russians were the first to find out how useful drones are when the Iranians began to help them with their with drones. And then now the world is talking about drones, but they were making fun of Iran. They were making fun of Iran's missile program, and they were ridiculing Iran's underground bases. This network that he has created across the country to defend the country, this military doctrine, will be taught in military universities for decades to come. He defeated the superpower, and he was martyred on day one. And so were many commanders in the previous 12-day war, but also in the first day of this war. So without him, despite his absence, in the absence of a leader for a full week, and some of the senior commanders, Iran won the war. That just shows the dedication of the Iranian people, the resilience of the Iranian people, the heroism of the Iranian people, but it also shows the brilliance and the wisdom of his leadership, which enabled us to accumulate that sort of power to defeat this coalition, this evil coalition, where just recently we saw the NATO Secretary General, as he was licking the boots of Trump, admitting that NATO was deeply involved in the war, like so many other entities. So he, I think, was a towering figure in history, a philosopher, a jurisprudent, and the fact that millions of people came to the streets at a time of war. We're being threatened. Trump himself just yesterday said, I could bomb the funeral and kill the leaders, but there'll be no one to negotiate with. Well, that means killing thousands of people who are participating in the funeral. And of course, no one in the West complains. You don't see European parliaments outrage, or you don't see Western media or journalists outrage at these. They don't care. And that just shows that Trump is not an exception to the rule. He is, they're all the same, the political elites. They're the enemies of the Iranian people, and they're the enemies of their own people. But his, I think that he was a towering figure. And the fact that so many millions of people went to the streets at a time when we're not really in peace, and in temperatures, Tehran in the summer, high, it's like 35, 36 degrees temperature. As I said, it took me 3 hours to get there, and I couldn't get near the Musalla. And then when I got home, finally, I had to sleep for a couple of hours. I was so exhausted. This dedication that you see among the Iranian people, there's a reason behind it. And you know as well as I, Iranians are highly educated. It's among the highest educated societies in the world. The anti-Iranian propaganda is enormous. The Persian media in the West that's hostile towards Iran, there's nothing like it in Russian or Chinese. And so Iranians get anti-Iranian propaganda daily. They have maximum pressure sanctions. They have multiple wars waged against them. And yet, despite all that, you see they come out in millions. Well, there's a reason for it. And that is because they know that Ayatollah Khamenei was a decent, extremely decent, moral person who cared about the oppressed, who cared about the deprived at home and abroad. He cared for the Palestinian people. He cared for the Venezuelans and the Cubans and anyone else who was oppressing. When he was president, he went to the frontline states in Southern Africa to help them in the resistance against apartheid South Africa. And that's why when Nelson Mandela was released finally, the man who was the United States considered a terrorist, one of the first countries that he came to was Iran, and he visited Ayatollah Khamenei and called him, he said, my leader. He called him my leader. Why? Out of great respect. So people see this, and so while the West demonizes him day and night, people across the world are now seeing through the propaganda. They see all these people on the streets, and they know that this means something, but it's not what they're being told.
It must have had a big impact on the neighbors. Unexpectedly, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia sent a delegation who conducted themselves very respectfully at the funeral. It must be a salutary. The whole thing, from the beginning of the Ramadan war to the funeral itself, it must be a particularly salutary lesson for the neighbors.
Without a doubt. Of course, if they learn. We don't know. I mean, the Saudis were allowing the Americans to refuel Israeli regime aircraft to bomb Iran and refuel their own aircraft to kill Iranian children throughout the war. And when the Saudi delegation came to Iran, this was not lost upon ordinary Iranians who were following the news or watching the delegations on television. But the Iranians want to bring about change in the region. They want these countries to tilt away from the empire, to become more sovereign. Now, they're all proxies and they're all compromised, and there are names in the Epstein documents, in the Epstein files, but Iran wants, and Iran is carrying out one-on-one negotiations with all of these countries that were involved in the war. I don't know about Jordan, but the countries in the Persian Gulf. And there has been some success, and there has been some change. If you've noticed that during the last few times the Americans violated the ceasefire, when the Iranians would strike back, they would bomb U.S. bases in Bahrain and Kuwait, but they didn't bomb Saudi Arabia or Qatar. Or even the Emirates. So there's a reason for that, I'm sure, and there are some agreements, but who knows? Because these are regimes that are very much bound to the West. The Iranians, when they broke the blockade on Yemen, which is another very important issue, the Saudis tried to prevent the Iranian passenger plane from landing in the capital. This is like the Iranians, but they did land. The plane did land, and the Yemeni air defenses forced the Saudi aircraft to leave. But the very fact that the Saudis would harass an Iranian airliner and try to blockade the airport in Yemen shows that it's still unclear which way things are going to go. The hope is that they'll come to their senses, recognize that the United States is not doing them any good. It has brought so much ruin upon the region, and it only cares about the Israeli regime. But then again, these are family dictatorships. They're bound to the West, and many of them are deeply compromised. So we'll have to see.
Well, if I had illegally stolen and frozen somebody else's money, and then I saw them whip the US and the Israeli assault on their country, and then I saw that there isn't any way that the government and system of that country whose money I was holding was ever going to fall by under duress. If I saw that there were tens of millions of supporters of the government next door to me, I'd actually cough up the money I'd nicked, and any sensible person would do that. So I predict that your negotiations will go better as a result of what has been demonstrated on the streets of Tehran. Lastly, Professor, the big hope of the world, who have a lot of skin in the game now, economic skin, and you have, of course, actual skin in the game, so do the rest of the people in the region. The hope is that out of all this will come an agreement that can bring about an end to war. How optimistic are you that that can be achieved at the end of what are very peculiar negotiations? Trump keeps announcing that Iran has asked him for a meeting. He never says who asked him, whether it was an Iranian restaurateur in Washington, D.C., or nobody at all. He never tells us. But whoever's asking, most people will hope that this can be resolved by negotiation rather than a return to war. How optimistic are you on that?
I'm not terribly optimistic, George, because that's the nature of empire, as you know better than I, is as such that it really can't reform itself. It cannot change. It can't change course, and that's the reason why when it's on the decline, it collapses rapidly, because it keeps pursuing models that don't work anymore. I hope that the United States will come to its senses, and I agree completely that this show of force on the streets of Tehran will have an impact. And by the way, the funeral is also going to Iraq, and I think that the crowds in Iraq, and you know how hot it is in Iraq, the crowds in Iraq, that will be itself another show of force. But I don't know. I mean, at the moment, the Iranians, they're counting on the leverage that they have in the Strait of Hormuz, and they are being patient for the time being. But Iranian patience, if it runs thin, then they're going to put pressure on the United States. It's obviously to the benefit of everyone for the United States to accept the deal and to move on. But the Israeli regime, the Israeli army does not want this. The Israeli firsters in the United States don't want this. When Joe Kent resigned at the beginning of the war, he was a Trump appointee, head of counterterrorism. He said very clearly that Iran was not a threat to the United States, that Iran was not pursuing a nuclear weapon, that this war is about the Zionist lobby and the Israeli regime. That they haven't left, they haven't gone anywhere. The only thing that I can think of that could bring about change is, of course, Iran's strength, and this show of force today is a part of that. The only thing I can think of is that the problems in the United States, the economic problems, would force Trump and maybe some of the Zionists in the United States to conclude that it's time for Netanyahu to go. He's destroyed the image of the Israeli regime. Israel is known to be genocidal, is known to destroy, to be ruinous to the world economy. Maybe some Zionists would like a facelift for the regime, and they too would like, they too would want him to leave. And so maybe if Netanyahu's power decreases, and I do believe that the differences between Netanyahu and Trump are real. Some don't agree. They think it's good cop, bad cop. I really think it is real. Of course, I don't have any inside information, but the tone that Trump uses is hurtful for Netanyahu. So I do think it's real. And so I think that there is a strong incentive for the United States to move towards de-escalation. But Zionism is a powerful force, and they are in control of the Senate and the House and the White House. So if I was a betting man, and I'm not, I wouldn't bet on peace.
Well, as we say, trust in God, but tie up your camel anyway. Thank you very much indeed, Professor, for another brilliant resume of where we stand and the verisimilitude of the very place that you are standing in and that we can see behind your shoulder, the scene of truly epochal scenes and developments on the streets of Tehran. May God bless you and your people, and thank you for joining us again on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Let me take a very belated break, but I think it was worth it, don't you? I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Fisher says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the Mother of All Talkshows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Well, almost 30,000 people have voted. In 250 years, has America been a force for good or evil? You can vote on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or on patreon.com/George Galloway. Let's go to the first call. It's Melvin in New York. He thinks the US is collapsing. I must say, Melvin, it does show some signs of that.
Yeah. Nice to speak to you again, George. You hear me okay?
And you? Yeah, very clear. Go ahead, Mel.
Okay. So the main reason that the United States is collapsing is because of Zionism. I mean, if you look at the very factor of, like, all right, say the First Amendment, we have people in the United States that one, which is a girl in Florida, is actually facing a prison sentence for making a Netanyahu joke. We have people where the FBI are actually going to their homes because they made any kind of comment about Israel. Not to mention the IDF agents that are actually in the Pentagon, in the ISIS or the ICE agencies, going after individuals. And the fact that the Israel lobby, OPEC, literally stated that one of our last elections was actually bought. And then you have President Trump himself making comments on the news, and I watched this the other day, saying that he was the best president of Israel. I mean, at that point, you pretty much...
Yeah. It was a
at that
flash
point,
of brilliant honesty.
Yeah. At that point, it shows that they've taken over. I mean, they've probably been taken over for many years. But, I mean... Well,
I don't know. The election in Kentucky, that was stolen from Thomas Massey, was undoubtedly an exercise in state capture. The supporters of a foreign country openly boasted that they spent more than $30 million in a small congressional area to lie and to deceive the voters into turning their back on their very popular Congressman Thomas Massey. That was a piece of state capture. But I actually believe that will turn out to be the high point, if you can put it that way, of their influence. Now I concur, which I don't often do, with the New York Times, who described AIPAC as now an albatross around the neck of Democratic Party politicians in particular. I pray in aid the results in your city in the elections just last week. Trump is trying to, absurdly, for someone like me, I can assure you, there's nothing more absurd than he's portraying as communism is inside the gates of the United States, the hammer and sickle. And this is how he's describing a group of tree-hugging, vegetarian, if not vegan, free love type tree huggers on the left of the Democratic Party. They're apparently a communist threat to the United States, a communist insurgency of a kind much more threatening to the US than, and he then rolls off the tongue all the countries that he had previously told us were the biggest threat to the United States. And now they're not the biggest threat to the United States. The biggest threat is domestic communism. Now, I know personally almost every communist in America, not because I know hundreds of thousands of people, but because I know the small number of people who identify as American communists, and very fine people they are too, but they are definitely not a danger to America. So I concurred with you right at the top of introducing you that the United States is showing dangerous signs of schizophrenia, of incoherence, and of a kind of, I don't want to say this too crudely, but a kind of bout of diarrhea everywhere, spreading everywhere across the American governmental system. And if I had more time, I'd pray in aid more. But more importantly, we've got Lieutenant Colonel Tony Aguilar coming up right in a couple of minutes, who's better placed to discuss that dysfunctionality which seems to attend every aspect of this stage, at least, of the administration of President Donald Trump. Let me read some comments that have been left on YouTube. Bob Cosmic says, "We like war, it's the only thing we're good at," quoting George Carlin. And Antonio Cristoforo says, "Columbus didn't discover America, he destroyed their civilizations." And Deja Ma Boutique says, "The British abolished slavery for the same reason the US, it was no longer tenable. It wasn't because they found humanity." And Ilham Jichi says, "Thank you, George, for correcting your thoughts about Mamdani. He is an amazing leader." Here's a legend on the line. Terence in Reading means he wants to talk about the meaning of regime as a descriptor. Terence, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. I trust you and you as well. And as a human who happens to be a Roman Catholic, and a Roman Catholic that respects all faiths and men, I prayed immediately for the soul of the Ayatollah and his family and his grandchildren for carrying the truth to his grave and to God. But then I listened to the BBC News yesterday, which I do from time to time, and they said the regime in Tehran, there were thousands on the streets. The regime in Tehran are still stultifying protests, and they don't want protests. There are millions that are not attending the march and the procession for the late great Ayatollah Khomeini. Now, then I got thinking about regime. Now, regime, is that where you starve the pensioners of the fuel money on a Christmas time and the cold weather payments? Is that when you tell older people they got to work further and harder and get a pension at a later time in life after being screwed for 45 years to get any pension at all? Is that when you get arrested for holding up cardboard signs? This name, regime. Now, I'm talking about Persia, who's never invaded anyone. Neither has China. In thousands of years. Now, I'm wondering where the real regime is. I mean, it surely can't be the West, and I just need clarification of, is it taking a cold weather payment off people? Is it telling people we let the water companies pollute the water and shareholders get the money? So please help me, Mr. Galloway. This word regime is it a democratic Western thing?
I wish I could. I wish I could, Terence, and I've been wrestling with this very point. And Professor Marandi made the obvious point that they never called the government of Saudi Arabia a regime. They never called the government of the United Arab Emirates a regime. But they call the government of Iran a regime as a matter of style. It's in their style book. But who writes it? Who decides that the government of Nicolas Maduro is a regime, but the government of his vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, is not a regime? Because you will have noticed, perspicacious as you are, that they no longer refer to the Venezuelan government as a regime. Either they're all regimes or none of them are regimes. You can't decide as a health warning given in advance of any news that you're about to impart that a country is ruled by a regime. What are your criteria for that? Is it the lack of elections? Well, it goes without saying there are no elections in Saudi Arabia. Is it a question of human rights? Need I say more? Is it a question of corruption? Well, I started out the show telling you about Nigel Farage's latest, not his last, but his latest corruption revealed in the Times tomorrow morning. The idea that any of these things is tantamount to a descriptor regime to be applied to Iran but not its neighbours is so patently absurd that I wonder that the journalists themselves never point this out to their editors. And I know for a fact that they don't. A big thanks to this week's top donors. You've been very generous this week. But please become a weekly donor, even of a small amount. Become a weekly donor to keep the show running and to keep the show independent. On the wall of fame this week, wow, Donna Ross, Donna from Panama, thank you again, brilliant, fabulous generosity. Carl Skow, S-K-O-W, thank you, Carl. Hussein Darwich, thank you, Hussein. Christopher Conway and Kenneth Edwin Vogstad, thank you, Christopher and Kenneth. Now all you have to do is click the Donate Now button on the moats.tv website. I mean, nothing could be easier. You don't have to dig in your pocket for change and find my hat and throw it in as you undoubtedly would if I was busking for you for an entire 2 hours. You just go to moats.tv and click Donate Now, even if you only donate £1, €1, or $1. Now, retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Aguilar, one of the best guests that we have had over the last couple of years, is a retired US soldier and a former worker and whistleblower at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And I thought he was the best man to talk us through the week in the United States in this, its 250th birthday. Tony, thank you very much for joining us. I notice you've disappeared from Twitter in the last few hours. Has anything happened, or am I breaking bad news to you that you didn't know? Or maybe it was just on my phone. I couldn't reach you there. It's not been a great week for the USA on its auspicious birthday, has it?
It has not been, and much of my social media was disabled about a month and a half ago. I had to recreate all my accounts, and the accounts weren't disabled due to violations or bans or restrictions. My accounts, in terms of all of my social media, were erased, shut down, bank accounts shut down. I had to pretty much recreate myself in terms of a new passport, new banking, new social media accounts. So I'm getting around to creating my new Twitter account, just kind of going through the paces of rebuilding my online presence and my my legal identity, because I was, for lack of better terms, attacked. But that goes with the territory when you speak out against brutality and the regime. And I use the regime meaning here in the United States.
It's an extraordinary business. A man like you, a distinguished military officer, a candidate for office in the Congress of the United States, a famous man, a man admired by many millions of people, should have his bank account paralyzed and have to get a new passport because of the acts of sabotage of those fighting a rearguard action. That's the consolation, Tony. It's a rearguard action that they're fighting. They're no longer on the front foot. They're no longer advancing. They are retreating at quite a pace, and they are becoming exceedingly reckless. Mark Levin, for example, just called for the United States to murder as many as they could of a crowd of millions of people at a funeral, and doesn't seem to even think, contemplate, however briefly, that this might be a bad look, not just for himself, but of course for his country, if indeed his country is the United States rather than Israel. They're on the retreat by every index. They are on the retreat. Political index most of all, don't you think?
I do absolutely think that is the case. And in the opening question about celebrating 250 years, it is my sincere hope that if the United States wishes to celebrate another 250 and beyond, that we begin to understand the way of the world as it stands now, not in the hegemonic superpower colonial world that the United States grew up in, but that we can understand our place in the world and how to cooperate and have normalized relations with China, Russia, Iran. And this is an opportunity to take that step in the right direction. I am fearful because here in the United States, we still have this iron grip on wanting to characterize the rest of the world as the villains, the Iranian government as a regime. If the Iranian government is a regime, well, then surely the Israeli government is a regime. So if you look at the characterizations of the rest of the world through the U.S. lens, we desperately need to change our foreign policy, change our place in the world in an understanding of multipolarity. And this time with this conflict in Iran could have been an opportunity for that. And right now, as it stands, we are once again, we blew past the exit of diplomacy on the highway to hell. And we continue to go down that highway with Israel as our passenger. And it's not going to end well. I mean, just here in the United States in our 250th year, we have now included Israel in our National Defense Authorization Act through House resolution and through the Senate resolution. It's been called Section 224. That is what the House resolution version. But in essence, what it is the United States-Israel Technology Cooperation Initiative, where it blends both the U.S. national defense and Israelis' national defense into one, with an executive agent appointed here in the United States, a secretariat-like function into that position. But we also saw in our Senate, which is now included in the NDAA, that the only step preventing it from becoming law is the president's signature, the Intelligence Authorization Act, which blends the CIA, the DIA, the NSA with Mossad in our Intelligence Authorization Act. So when you hear Netanyahu say things like, we're not going to ask the U.S. for money anymore, we don't need it, in a way, he's right, because with this National Defense Authorization Act and the Intelligence Authorization Act, they don't have to ask for money. They have their own checkbook directly into the United States budget. And that should make every American very concerned. I know that our founding fathers on this 250th year anniversary are rolling over in their graves.
It's just everything seems to be going wrong all at the same time. First of all, a war of choice was launched and failed. And, if you come at the king, you mustn't miss. And that's what they have done. They came at the Iranian Republic to kill it and failed. And now the Iranian Republic is far stronger than it was before the assassination attempt of the Islamic Republic was attempted. The political class seems to me to be circling the drain. Mitch McConnell, is he alive or is he dead? If he's dead, why can't they tell us? The answer is because he's the senator for Kentucky, and if he is dead, there'll have to be a special election. And Thomas Massey, defenestrated from the Congress, will immediately stand for the Senate and likely win. And $32 million of Israel lobby money will have been spent all for nothing. This is just the latest example, and there are many more of how it's all going wrong for America at this point.
Yeah, I would argue that Mitch McConnell was never truly alive. He's always been a demon and a vampire, if you will. But now that it's questionable as to his mortality, if he is standing or lying, that, to your point, that's an excellent opportunity now for the previously beaten Thomas Massey of the 4th Congressional District of Kentucky, who was beat because AIPAC put substantial millions of dollars into the campaign against him. Wouldn't it just be poetic justice and a silver lining that Mitch McConnell is no longer able to fill that seat, either by mental capacity or living capacity, and that Thomas Massey is then able to run for that Senate seat? What a silver lining, poetic justice. I hope that we see something like that to get at least a salvation breath back towards regaining the nation that I once fought for, that I was once proud of. But yeah, when you look at let's just look at what's happening in Iran this week with the funeral procession for the Ayatollah or Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. There's over 100 nations that have sent official delegations to these proceedings. That doesn't sound to me like a pariah state that the world fears. It sounds quite the opposite.
A very good point. And we'll come back to what happens next in Iran in a minute or two, if you forgive me, because I wanted to ask you about something that once upon a time your country and mine were fond of using as a stick to beat other people, namely corruption in the ruling house. And I think we can say that the Trump household is not just an elected president, but there is a ruling caste now. Some might cruelly call them the Epstein caste. And that caste, which involves sons and daughters and their husbands and wives, are all literally making hay, not millions, but hundreds of millions of profits on what the father, the president, openly admitted on television was insider trading. Insider trading that he says his kids all love doing, apparently oblivious to the fact that it's a crime, a codified crime to be insider trading. But hey, his kids love to do it, and he openly admits that they are doing it. The corruption is off the charts, Tony.
It is absolutely off the charts, and this current regime in the United States is the American crime family. And for every service member who is currently out of the 60,000 plus now waiting and floating around the Persian Gulf for another escalatory war to kick off, I ask them to ask themselves, really why are we embroiled in this conflict? And that is because of the American crime family: Donald Trump, Barron Trump, Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., his daughter Ivanka Trump, and David and Kushner. Whether it's buying islands from other countries to create more economic control, and let's not doubt that the reason the Kushner family wants to buy that island is because of its strategic positioning in a strategic waterway from Europe into the Mediterranean, from the Adriatic Sea. So there is no question that that's really what it's for. But then you look at how all of the Donald Trump children are raking it in, how Donald Trump himself, I think it was $1.2 billion in personal profit from his various Ponzi schemes over the last year and a half alone. But all the way down to Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago pool guy, who got the no-bid contract to resurface the Lincoln reflecting pool. $14-15 million in that. So everybody in the orbit of Donald Trump, from the pool guy to the janitor that hides the secret files in the bathrooms at Mar-a-Lago, have all gotten rich. We even have now Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff still involved in negotiating some of the most important deals, so to speak, in the world as it stands right now, but also who are only there to elicit personal profit for the president and for themselves. Jared Kushner is a real estate mogul.
The big guy, Biden and Hunter were amateurs compared to this gang that's in the White House now.
Absolutely. And yeah, they were the Biden family, Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. This would have been, the way exactly how you described it, amateurs compared to these professional criminals. Donald Trump is a professional criminal, and he's established a cabinet of professional criminals. Pete Hegseth doesn't go to work without his wife because he's afraid of people making fun of him. And that's true. The Secretary of Defense of the United States of America, Pete Hegseth, his wife accompanies him to work into all of his top secret briefings. She now has a top secret clearance because she has to be at his side to help ensure that he stays sober. That's the state of the great American nation now, to where our president is stealing from the American people left and right. His family is stealing from the American people left and right. Everyone in his cabinet is getting rich, and those in his cabinet have to have their spouses at their side because they're afraid of their work because it may lead them to drinking or becoming an alcoholic yet again. That's the state of the nation right now.
Yeah, the State of the Union is frankly rotten. But let's turn to the still unresolved, gigantic, potentially existential issues in which the United States has a central role, starting with Iran. We've all seen, and Trump has seen, because he's reported by his own pet agency Axios to have asked the question as to why so many millions were crying for Ayatollah Khamenei, and he said, I was told that nobody liked him. What's going to happen after the funeral when inevitably either negotiations must resume or war must resume?
Well, let's not doubt that with these dignitaries that are visiting in Iran during this week, because the funeral procession began yesterday with prayers and ceremonial types of celebrations, but also through the week, ending with the Ayatollah's burial in his home city of Mashhad, which is in northern Iran. But of the dignitaries there, just to name a few, we've got Pakistan, Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia. You've got Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Armenia, Malaysia. You've got Russia, Belarus, Serbia. You've got nations from all over the world attending this. There are diplomatic discussions. There are other discussions going on in this ceremonial visit and this occasion. And you notice who's not invited and who didn't go, and the United States, etc. So when you look at how the President of the United States and the U.S. defense apparatus critically underestimated and miscalculated this conflict, a war of choice, as you put it, which it absolutely is, that where we find ourselves now, the memorandum of understanding as it stood weeks ago was the best option for the United States to exit this conflict. Now, in looking at it at face value, you would say, well, this isn't necessarily a good deal for the United States. Well, it is a good deal for the United States when you consider the United States has lost a war that it started. It's a pretty good deal for the United States to have taken that off-ramp. But vis-a-vis Israel, we couldn't settle for that. We saw hostilities pick back up. We saw pretense to the hostilities vis-a-vis blaming Iran. And now what we're looking at is that Oman and Iran, during this time of peaceful dividend, have now established a service fee administrative control of the Strait of Hormuz, something the United States was adamantly pushing against, but now that's going forward. Iran has had the opportunity to shore up more alliances, and the United States hasn't changed the conditions of leverage for this MOU going forward, to where when peace talks come back in varying degrees, it's not just going to come back as one, because now we have to get through the hurdle of the technical talks in Qatar over the Strait of Hormuz, over lifting of certain sanctions, over the unfreezing of certain Iranian assets. But then we have to go on to the larger, harder question of Lebanon. And that question is going to be a very difficult question for the United States to provide an answer to, while still backing Israel's occupation of Lebanon. And our very own Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is brokering a deal between Lebanon and Israel for the continued occupation along the south, along the Litani line up into Hebron, in direct contradiction to Article 1 of the very MOU that the President of the United States signed. It is a disastrously psychotic position of negotiation, where you have the President of the United States who has signed an MOU. You then have the Secretary of State negotiating between Israel and Lebanon in direct contention to the MOU, while you then have the Vice President trying to shore up any type of relations at the technical level to perhaps set the table again to come back to talks. But then you still have the question of Lebanon. And then now the United States has dirtied the water even a little bit more by arming, enabling, and mobilizing the Kurds, the PJAK and the KDPI in Western Iran, to where there are active clashes ongoing right now between IRGC and Iranian forces, border forces, and the Iraqi and Iranian Kurds that the United States is directly backing in this peripheral conflict. It's a mess, and the United States is not making it any cleaner. We're just making it messier, and it's like I said, it is my hope that the United States will see another 250 years. But if we continue on this path of the Donald Trump policy and the criminal family of the Trump family, that we're not going to see it.
Well, none of us might. The whole world can end unexpectedly, of course, by nuclear accident or design. speaking of which, one thing has become clearer since we last talked, and that is that the Russians are carrying all before them on the battlefront in the Ukraine. Konstantinovka has fallen. Only effectively undefendable cities lie ahead of them and between them and Kiev. The possibility of the war being spread by Zelensky to bring in Belarus in the hope that that will engage the Europeans in direct conflict and maybe even entice the United States into it. The gloves are off, and the Russians are going for broke. How do you see the development of the war in Ukraine?
Well, Russia now sees the opportunity because the hand in the puppet of Ukraine, the United States, has now been distracted and has once again shown its true face, to where we've taken substantial assets out of Ukraine in order to send to Central Command to defend Israel, specifically to arm and defend Israel. I'm sure you've seen in the news here last week that the United States Army Europe and Africa Commander, 4-star General Chris Donahue, CD as most of us called him, I've worked with him directly, I know him personally, resigned / was retired / was fired. The reason for that is because of General Donahue's direct contention and pushback to the administration and the Secretary of Defense over Ukraine, in that, if Ukraine is in a war that Ukraine cannot sustain on its own. So there are many diplomatic avenues that Ukraine has either ignored or not pursued, regardless of opinion, that they should have, but they didn't, because you have the United States backing them with defense capability beyond their means. And now that defense capability is gone. We're not giving them ATACMS missiles. We're not giving them PRISM missiles. We're not giving them the Patriot defense systems. We're not giving them those electronic defense measures that we once were. And now that gap is clearly open. And there will be sustained loss by Russians initially, but they've already pushed past that. And I think that the upper hand tactically, not just on the battlefield, on the Donbas fronts, but politically, now favors Russia. So yet again, we are learning a real life example that when you betray your allies in the midst of your allies fighting for the very thing that we push them into sustaining a fight for, they end up getting thrown under the bus, quite literally. And that's what the United States is doing to Ukraine. And that is why we had a 4-star general, the highest rank in the military, a 4-star general, make his opposition to that known and was subsequently fired. And so who do you think they're going to put in his place? They're going to put a yes man in his place. And that yes man is going to continue down this path that is not in Ukraine's best interest.
Fascinating. But don't forget the regime are being very handsomely rewarded. I mean, even Zelensky's mother and father have been nabbed by the NAB, the Anti-Corruption Bureau. Their house was raided. Zelensky's mother and father and $11 million were found in the house. And the explanation of Zelensky's mother and father is that this was a gift. Somebody gifted them $11 million in cash. I mean, it's enough to make a horse laugh, Lieutenant Colonel.
It's like a bank robber robbing a bank, and as he walks out of the bank with a big old bag of cash, he just simply calls it a withdrawal. Yeah, I mean, yes, we have thieves and crooks and essentially white collar gangsters from the United States to Europe. We have the White House of the United States is occupied by a man who has failed at nearly everything he's done other than corruption, who is now showing all of the faces of that corruption, and we see it every day when his 19-year-old son, who's a freshman in college, is making multi-million-dollar trades off of cryptocurrency or online betting based on bets as to whether or not the United States will start or not start a war with Iran, when his father is the one that makes that decision. And everybody thinks, oh, Barron Trump is such a wise businessman. No, he's not. His father is the one who is leading the corruption, and he's directly profiting for it. And we should see that for what it is. It is a crime family.
Yes, they make the Sopranos look like choir boys. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Aguilar, retired soldier, former worker and whistleblower at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. You've been very helpful. I'm grateful for your time. Let's take a quick break, then it's your calls all the way to Gayatri's Roundup. Stay tuned.
As the green smoke rose, their faces flashed out, pallid green, and faded again as it vanished. Then slowly the hissing passed into a humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Suddenly, a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out after it. Forthwith, flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man were suddenly and momentarily turned to fire.
$30,000 votes are in, and I'm closing the poll. In 250 years, has America been a force for good or evil? Well, on Telegram, 93% say evil. On X, even, 80% say evil. On the YouTube community poll, 87%. On the YouTube stream, 90% say a force for evil. And on patreon.com/George Galloway, it's a whitewash. It's 100% say evil. I told you they were the advance guard. But in a poll of 30,000 people, that's a pretty significant result. Let's go to Will in California. He wants to talk about revolution in the United States. Careful now, Will.
Yeah, good to talk to you, George. We once heard the answer to 1984 is 1776, but maybe the answer to 2026 is a peaceful version of 1789 France. When government acts against the will of its people... Well,
let's make it peaceful. No guillotines, please. Well, maybe one or two.
No, only proverbial heads will roll, George. We got to keep it legal here. When government acts against the will of its people,
keep it legal, yeah.
And eventually
I
revolution...
don't know why they're so against revolution. Why are they so against revolution, Will? Your country began with a revolution. Although it could be argued it was a counter-revolution. could be argued that they started the resolution because the British drew a line and said that's as far west as you're going to be allowed to go because we have treaty obligations with the Native Americans, and you'll not be allowed to just rampage against them. Oh, and by the way, we're going to abolish slavery, and you won't be able to treat other humans as beasts that you can chain and lock. But let's not get into that. That might be a bit cruel, Will.
Oh no, I'm just using that as an analogy, but you got to admit the disconnect over here is incredible, and it feels like Trump has basically been bubble wrapped in a White House playpen with a Zenith TV locked on Fox News and a tablet connected to True Social where he conducts his foreign policy. We've gone from a Christian country to a Zionist country over here. And since when do we condone killing peace negotiators and journalists or bombing critical infrastructure, middle schools, hospitals, and universities? When do people start saying, what do we have to lose? We need to utilize the internet and come together and fight the donors' total control over our leadership over here. Revolution should be peaceful, but it requires the common folk to find common ground. Left and right unite, I say.
It also requires a leader, Will, and I know this is controversial. Many of the audience don't like me saying this. They always push back when I do. But movements need leaders. And for me, the obvious standout for a third way in the United States, really a second way, because the Uni Party are a singularity, despite having different colors of ties, is Tucker Carlson. If Tucker Carlson were to run for president, and he's the only one, in my opinion, who would have a chance to win, it could change the country, it could change the world. Where do you stand on that?
Oh, I'm totally for it, and we've seen it all over X lately, that MTG and Tucker have been meeting, and they've been discussing this. It's absolutely necessary, and we need to stomp our feet and get our message heard with a third party. We don't want to be a donkey. We don't want to be an elephant. There's got to be some sort of a party that has a good common name, like the American Party or the Patriot Party or something other than donkeys and elephants. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I like elephants and donkeys, but I hate the Democrats and the Republicans. The truth is they're two cheeks of the same ass, and only shit can be expected from between those two cheeks. And so something new is required. And there's not much time in order to do it. You've got to get a party, get it funded, get it registered, get it on the ballot for 2028, for the presidential elections and the other elections that will be held at that time. So time is of the essence. And so I urge everyone involved to get their act together. The question of who should be the running mate is obviously an important one, but a secondary one. Let's get Tucker in the field as a candidate for the presidency of the United States. Now, he thinks I should be the Prime Minister of Britain. He told Sky News of this, and I was very grateful to him. But the chances of me becoming Prime Minister are slim. I can't even safely return to my own country. But I sure as heck would be in Washington offering my advice to Tucker Carlson, whether he wanted it or not, whether he accepted it or not. I'd be there trying to influence him. But I don't believe that he would need much influencing. Tucker Carlson has been on a political journey which is a journey of righteousness. It's a journey to the right place. He is the man. He's papabile. If he only was a Roman Catholic, he'd know what that meant. Will in California, thank you for the opportunity to sound off about that. Now, a roll call for this week's top donors. Time to recognize your loyalty and devotion to the Mother of All Talkshows. Here are the names of those who've donated this week. Dan Raj, M.N. Baig, Heidi Rohwer, Lynn Timperley, and George J. Ashgar Jr., who's a generous weekly donor. And Lynn comes up very often also. God bless you all. Thank you. And please, the rest of you, I've been busking now for 2 hours. I've provided 2 of global significance guests in Colonel Aguilar and in Professor Marandi. Are you going to watch a performance like that and just walk on by without putting anything in the hat? I hope not. So go to moats.tv and leave your donation. Khalid is in Nova Scotia on the 250th anniversary for the United States. Khalid, go ahead, sir.
Yes, George, thank you. First of all, I don't want to stop the party. You was on a good roll at the end there, and I want to say this up front. I can never compete with you on adjectives. I like that terminology. You know, nothing can come between two cheeks except shit. George is brilliant. Now, listen. I'm
sorry if it was a little crude.
No, but it was perfect. It was perfect. There were some times when these kinds of descriptions are the most accurate thing to describe what we really mean. So it didn't come off as profanity at all. I never saw it as profanity. Now, with respect to the question, George, the question you asked about the 250th anniversary of United States, that question there took me off my seat here, George. Took me off my seat because the question itself, I would think, is the quintessential question, not of just a year, but the time. The times. If you were to look at 250 years and the times where we are, the axiomatic position of where the world is, that is the quintessential global of the times. And truthfully speaking, I thought about it, and I can't just glibly say yes or no. And not to suggest that is not obvious to some, or not obvious, but I couldn't really answer that question. I couldn't answer that question, and here's the reason why, George. This idea, the idea of America, the idea of liberation, the idea of we the people, and all these ideas that were there are not just simply ideas which is unique to America. I think that idea is unique to humanity. Whether it was Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, or all of them that talked about the liberation of the human spirit and the equality of man. Essentially, quintessentially, it comes down to that point there. So I have to say that I believe the idea was a spark in a dark world at the time of its resonation, of its signature in terms of 1775, 76, whatever the period was. The idea. Now the question is whether or not it lived up to that idea is something else. So how do you hold on to the idea?
The idea was born in, Khalid, the idea was born in sin. It was written by people who had slaves, plenty of them. The army was led by George Washington, who had hundreds of slaves, hundreds of them. The dinner was being served to Thomas Jefferson as he wrote these resounding words by slaves whom he owned, who were not free men, and any child that they begat was a slave from the moment that they were born. His property. You can't be writing highfalutin words like that whilst holding other men and women as slaves. You cannot be writing highfalutin words like that and then massacring the Native American people at Wounded Knee and making false treaties with them that you fully intend to break and drown, soak in blood. You cannot be writing highfalutin words like these and sending the Native American women and children down the trail of tears to their oblivion. That makes a mockery of the highfalutin words. Now, where I will concur with you is this: there's nothing special about America, and there's nothing special about the American empire. They do what they do, not because they're American, but because they're an empire. The British Empire did exactly the same. All empires are criminal enterprises because they rest on the assumption of racial superiority as a license to loot, rampage, rape, and kill lesser men and women and children. And I will make an exception for the very brief period, but glorious, in which the United States entered the Second World War. It was a close-run thing as to whether they were going to enter it at all, but enter it they did for very special reasons, namely that the Japanese attacked them, and Hitler then declared war on the United States, not the other way around, but the heroism of the U.S. servicemen and women, the heroism of the fighters in the Pacific War, the heroism of the young Americans who landed on the beaches of Normandy and fought their way west. This heroism is a glorious chapter in the United States history, to which I tip my cap and always have. I've visited the war graves in Normandy that the United States left behind, their men, their blood, their bones on European soil, however belatedly, was shed by heroes. But the United States has not fired an honourable shot since 1945. And neither have the British. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Thanks, Khalid. Some comments. SnowNam227 says 250 years of genocide, bullying and piracy. Haig says, what do we call a country born in race genocide and baptized in race slavery? The only nation on earth not based on race. And Victor Ogbodaga says the US has not been all bad, but its imperial ambitions have unleashed evil upon the world. Joe Manch says, hey George, you forgot to mention that Aguilar is running for Congress with the Green Party. I didn't know. I thought he was running as an independent, so it wasn't deliberate. And anyway, the Green Party in the US is my party for the moment. I supported Jill Stein not once but twice in her run for president. And Hugh Deef says, happy 250th USA. I've had steak pies older than that. Maurice is in Orlando in Florida and wants to talk about my interview with Li Jingjing on CGTN. Yes, Maurice, I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, yes, I did enjoy it. You should have her on. George, she was if you haven't checked out the interview, go check it out. everybody I recommend it. But yes, you should have Li Jingjing on. And you are
She's
right,
marvelous.
George.
She's a very good friend of ours. And she's been on the show many times.
Yes, but you are right, George. People keep voting for two cheeks of the same backside, and the people keep eating shit. Tell it like it is. And I have another thing. Trump is right. There is communism in America, communism for the rich. And it is time to invert that communism. And Tucker is
You've got to laugh, Maurice. You've got to laugh at Elon Musk, an illegal immigrant who's received $40 billion in communist subsidy from the American taxpayer, denouncing immigrants and communists in the same simple message. Now, have you downloaded the Moats podcast yet? Tell your friends, check it out wherever you get your podcast from. This week, we're in the top 10 for politics in Nigeria, Cyprus, Bhutan, Russia, and Kenya. And we're in the top 30 for politics in the UAE, Malaysia, Kuwait, Bulgaria, and Botswana. What a wonderful collection of chart places. Last call before Gayatri is from Eve in Florida, also on Trump and tungsten. Wow. I don't think we've ever discussed tungsten on the Mother of All Talk shows before. So I'm all ears, Eve. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me. Well, I went on AI and I asked the following question. What is the metal that price has jumped the most in wartime? And AI answer, the absolute record holder is tungsten. Tungsten, very heavy metal, heavier than gold. And you know that Donald Trump and his children have purchased a mine in Kazakhstan, a huge mine in tungsten. And I regard tungsten as a leading indicator of war. It is in fact called the war metal. So number one, I think this is a leading indicator. I think that after the election, the war will restart. And the second thing is it puts the corruption of Trump's family on another level. Because there is one thing to have insider information, but to buy tungsten, to make a war, to get Americans killed, and to make money on the tungsten has never been seen before, like Trump would say. And that's what I wanted to say.
Well, you said it very powerfully. I'm surprised that Kazakhstan would welcome these hucksters as investors, not least because they'll probably be in jail as soon as Trump leaves office. All of this money will end up contested, if not confiscated. And of course, the next administration, if it's hostile to the Trump era, well, that will not be something that anyone, especially in Kazakhstan, will want to be associated with. So I'm surprised about it. I did know about it, but you've educated me on the value of tungsten. I hope it doesn't count as insider trading, but if I was a man investing in the stock markets, I'd be after tungsten. But that is not financial advice. I'm joined by the woman without whom the news wouldn't be the news. Here's Gayatri. What's happening, Gayatri?
Well, first of all, my heart weeps with the people of Iran and the tens of millions that have traveled from afar, crossed continents to descend onto the streets of Tehran for the funeral of the leader, the martyr, Seyed Ali Khamenei. And the empire spent billions on propaganda, against Iran, decades of sanctions in an attempt to suffocate the people of Iran, only to see it all go down the drain this week by the size, unimaginable size, and the sincere depth of this funeral. In the same week that America is celebrating its 250th birthday, which completely overshadowed it, of course. America and Iran experienced the same heat, but somehow Iran managed to receive these millions to all pay their respect and bid their farewell to their leader.
That's a good point, you know. It's much hotter in Iran than it is in Washington, D.C.
It is.
But they had to cancel the Independence Parade in Washington, D.C., but they haven't cancelled the funeral.
No, they haven't.
And tens of millions are at it.
Yes, and you know, people outside Iran, in the West, but beyond, they are confused and somewhat jealous by seeing the footage of the funeral, how the size of this procession, which even AI could not have created for you. It's such an impact. They're bewildered by it. And as Trump said, I didn't believe that so many people love the leader. This is it. They love their leader with all their heart. This is something that people in the West cannot comprehend, because who loves
our leaders?
Who loves our leaders? So
not even their wives.
No. So speaking from the capital of my mother country, me and all the Indonesian people, we bow our heads in respect and humility to the people of Iran, their martyred leader, and the proceedings of their the funeral procession.
Amen. Amen. Well said. Well said. Well, we've not got a lot of time. Have you got anything else?
The West, did you know that the UK is currently threatened by a little girl in a pink headscarf? She lives in the woods.
I see where you're going with this.
And she has a best friend with a bear. I'm talking about Masha and the bear. And in the UK, parliamentarians have put under pressure the urge to remove Masha and the bear off the television screens, of Netflix, of ITVX, because of course this little girl is nothing but a Putin propagandist. I mean, it is true. I mean, we watch, our children have watched it before, long before. I don't know why this is a news item now, but
because Netflix have just bought it.
Just launched it. So it's true that there are indeed Russian messages in the series. The girl spotted a picture of Pushkin on the wall of Masha. And God forbid that our children start showing interest in the classic works of this Russian giant literature, right? And next thing you know, our children will be walking around with snow under their boots.
And ballet shoes and all the cultural treasures. I don't know whether to laugh or cry about this story. I don't know whether to be angry or happy that the British government has reached the stage where, with children being slaughtered across the globe, the only children they're interested in are the children who might watch Masha and the bear, whose family values are impeccable. Masha comes from a lovely family of a mum and a dad and a grandma, of course, a babushka. She's, as far as we can tell, growing up straight, and her only kink is that she loves her teddy bear. You can see how the political class, I mean, Keir Starmer boasted this week, I don't know why it's a boast actually, he boasted that Britain had the gayest parliament in the world. Now, I don't know about you, I didn't need to know that. I have no interest in that. I don't know how he knows that. All I care about is having a parliament that gets off its knees and stands up for what's right. And that's a parliament we don't have. Thanks, Gayatri. Sorry we've overrun quite substantially, but I hope you think it was worth it. I thought it was a top show tonight with two top guests and Gayatri bringing it to a very fine conclusion and speaking most powerfully about the extraordinary, epochal events in Tehran over the last couple of days. I've actually been watching the proceedings right from the beginning, not least because we're here in a Muslim country. It's a very significant Muslim event. I've been amazed at the piety and fervor of millions of people. And if Donald Trump hasn't, I certainly have concluded that this is not a war that you can win, Donald. You should cut your losses. You should realize that a return to war with a country boiling with anger at your murder of their leader and all his family that were living with him in that house, and who then went on to kill later that day all those little girls in that school, and the girls that were killed in the gymnasium, the volleyball players, and the health workers that were killed, and the men, women, and children that were killed by you, I would cut my losses if I was you. Because if this goes back to war, all those red flags will be as nothing as to the determination of the people you'll be fighting to make you pay, and pay dearly for the crimes that you have committed. It's been marvelous for us. I hope it was for you. And if it was, then do please come back for our live show on Wednesday, the Mother of All Talkshows. Gayatri and I will be back presenting that show. So tell someone, build the audience, and leave a donation